Marriage is not what many people think it is. It is not just fine pictures, smiling faces, or matching outfits. It is early mornings when you are tired, late nights when you are worried, and days when you question your own strength. Helen did not know this when she said yes to Edward at 23. She only knew he was kind, calm, and hardworking, even though he was not wealthy. Esther, her closest friend, could not understand why she agreed to marry a man who was still trying to find his feet. Helen, you are rushing into suffering, Esther warned her one evening while they sat together. Helen laughed softly and replied, I am not marrying money, I am marrying a man. Esther shook her head and said firmly, I will wait for comfort. I cannot start life from the bottom. Helen smiled but said nothing more, because in her heart she believed peace was better than appearance. The first year of Helen's marriage was full of adjustments. Edward's income was small and they had to manage carefully. Helen washed clothes with her hands and cooked simple meals. Some days she felt overwhelmed, but Edward never ignored her efforts. Thank you for standing with me, he would say each night. Meanwhile, Esther continued her life of waiting. She often told Helen, I will not enter marriage to suffer. My husband must already be comfortable. She began dating Hilary, a man who seemed confident and promising. Don't worry, Hilary would tell her. I will give you the life you want. Esther believed him fully. To her, marriage should begin with enjoyment, not endurance. But life was already shaping two different journeys for the two friends. Esther's impatience grew as months passed. One night while she was visiting Helen, she found herself staring at the small but cozy home Edward and Helen had built. She thought to herself, could it be that I'm missing something? But just as quickly as the thought came, she pushed it away, focusing instead on the lavish dates Hilary kept taking her on. They were living their version of a fairy tale. But as the evening wore on and Helen laughed gently at a shared memory, something shifted in Esther. Could the life she had chosen truly offer her happiness? While Helen adjusted to marriage, Esther continued to wait for the life she imagined. She visited Helen often and watched her manage her home carefully. When Helen became pregnant, Esther admired her courage but could not imagine living that way. This is too stressful, she said one afternoon. Helen smiled and replied, it is not always easy, but we are learning together. Esther shook her head and said, I want ease from the beginning. Helen simply said, ease can come later. As time passed, Helen gave birth to her first child and later a second. Motherhood stretched her energy and patience. She woke early and slept late, caring for her home and children. Some nights she cried quietly from exhaustion, but Edward noticed. One evening he found her struggling to wash clothes and gently stopped her. You are doing too much, he said. Helen sighed and replied, it is part of life. Edward looked at her and promised, give me time. Eventually, Esther's long wait seemed to pay off when Hilary proposed. The wedding was grand and beautiful. Guests admired the decorations and music. Esther felt proud and satisfied. This is the kind of life I wanted, she told Helen happily. Helen hugged her and wished her well. But behind the beauty was a truth Esther did not yet know. Hilary had borrowed heavily to create the luxurious wedding Esther desired. At first, everything looked perfect, but soon after marriage, cracks began to show. Bills appeared and expenses grew. One evening, Esther asked Hilary, why are we struggling already? Hilary hesitated before admitting, I borrowed to give you the wedding you wanted. Esther was shocked. The comfort she expected was built on debt. Meanwhile, Helen's life continued steadily, and Edward remained determined to improve their situation. The second year of Helen's marriage was different. Though the challenges of parenthood continued, she had learned to embrace the rhythm of it all. Her small home, once filled with noise and frustration, now had a rhythm of laughter and peaceful nights. The occasional struggles were never overwhelming. They had their moments of exhaustion, but there was also a calm in knowing they were facing life together. Helen learned to navigate the intricacies of motherhood, but she never fully left behind the memory of Esther's words. "Is this all worth it?" she asked herself on occasion. Still, the answer was always clear. She would endure for the family she was building. Meanwhile, Esther's life remained unchanged. Her apartment, pristine and perfectly arranged, was a reflection of the life she had always imagined. She wasn't struggling with laundry or sleepless nights, nor did she have to deal with the late-night feedings Helen had described so vividly. But the distance between the two friends began to grow. Esther's visits to Helen became less frequent. She was uncomfortable seeing the simplicity of Helen's home, and every time Helen smiled through her tired eyes, Esther's doubts about her own life grew. "I'll never be ready for all of this," she confessed to Hilary one evening. Hilary, sitting across from her, paused for a long moment. "Maybe you'll never be ready," he said quietly, "but it's not about that. Life won't wait for you to feel ready. It will make you ready." Esther looked at him, unsure of what to make of his words. Hilary wasn't the same man he had been when we first met. There was a quietness about him now, an unease that had never been there before. Eventually, after months of living in her comfort zone, Esther's reality began to catch up with her. One evening, Hilary came home late from work, and Esther noticed the strained look on his face. He's hiding something, she thought, but she couldn't pinpoint it. "Is everything okay?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Hilary stood at the doorway, his coat still on, his mind elsewhere. "Yeah," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Everything's fine." But the next day, Esther stumbled upon a bank statement in the kitchen. It was the kind of statement she had only seen once before. High credit card debt. But this time, the number was far higher. Esther stared at the paper, her heart sinking. What have I missed? Just as she began to process what she was seeing, her phone buzzed with a message from Helen. "I need your help. Can we talk?" Esther's heart raced. Could this be the sign she had been waiting for? She didn't know, but as she stood in that moment, holding the paper and staring at the phone, one question lingered. Was she truly ready for what was coming next? Esther tried to remain hopeful after Hilary confessed that he had borrowed money for the wedding. She told herself that things would improve soon, but the pressure only increased. Expenses began to pile up. Food was not as abundant as she expected. Hilary became quieter and more worried. One evening, she confronted him, saying, "You promised me comfort." Hilary sighed deeply and replied, "I was trying to give you what you wanted." The home that once felt exciting now felt heavy. They began to argue over small things. Esther missed the peace she once had while single. She started noticing how much work marriage required. Cooking, cleaning, planning, adjusting. Responsibilities she never truly considered before. Meanwhile, Hilary struggled to keep up appearances, but the truth was now clear. Their life was not as stable as it looked. The glow of their early days together was slowly fading, and Esther was beginning to feel the weight of it all. Her mind wandered to Helen's words, "Ease can come later." Helen had said that in passing, but now Esther understood its true meaning. The hard work Helen had put in, the sacrifices she had made, was starting to make sense to Esther. But it was too late now. The reality of Esther's situation had set in, and there was no turning back. The stress of their finances began to take a toll on their relationship. Hilary's absence from home became more frequent as he worked long hours, trying to make ends meet. He returned home late, often tired, withdrawn and anxious. His promises to provide comfort had quickly crumbled under the weight of debt and unfulfilled expectations. Meanwhile, Helen's life was different. As Edward's hard work slowly began to show results, things were beginning to shift. He wasn't suddenly wealthy, but the small improvement in their financial situation gave Helen a sense of hope. Their modest home, once a symbol of struggle,
now felt more like a place of peace. Helen had come to understand that even though things weren't perfect, they were growing. Edward had kept his promises, not in grand gestures but in the small, everyday ways that truly mattered. One evening, Edward came home with a surprise, a washing machine. For me, Helen asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Yes, Edward replied, his eyes soft with affection. You've done so much for us. It's time to make things easier for you. Tears welled up in Helen's eyes as she stood in the kitchen, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of it all. She hadn't expected such a gesture. It wasn't the kind of luxury that Esther would have wanted, but it was the kind of care that mattered in their situation. That small washing machine represented all the hard work, the sweat, and the dedication Edward had put into building their life together. But just as things seemed to be looking up for Helen, Esther's struggles deepened. One evening, as she and Hilary argued about the mounting bills, Hilary slammed his fist onto the table in frustration. I'm doing my best. This isn't what I imagined either. Esther stood frozen, the weight of their reality crashing down on her. She needed answers, but Hilary couldn't offer them. She couldn't keep living like this. She knew something had to change, but where would she even begin? And just as Esther considered her next step, a knock came at the door. It was a delivery, but the package wasn't addressed to her. It was for Hilary, marked with a familiar company name, the same one she had seen on the loan documents months earlier. What was Hilary hiding now?
Esther's reality deepened when she became pregnant. Instead of excitement, she felt fear. The fear wasn't about the baby. It was the overwhelming weight of everything else in her life. One night, she whispered to Hilary, I don't think I am ready. Hilary admitted softly, neither am I. The arrival of motherhood changed everything. Sleepless nights replaced social outings. Physical exhaustion replaced comfort. Esther began to understand the depth of responsibility that came with raising a child. The baby depended on her for everything, and there was no break. She missed her old freedom, but had no choice but to adapt. One evening, after hours of trying to calm the crying baby, she broke down and said, This is harder than I imagined. Hilary responded quietly, We will learn. Slowly, Esther began to accept that motherhood was not about readiness, but growth. The physical strain was one thing, but the emotional exhaustion was another. As she looked at her newborn, Esther began to question herself. Was I ever truly prepared for this? There were moments of doubt when she felt overwhelmed, moments when she wished for the ease of life before the baby. Her body ached, her emotions ran high, and the weight of it all was suffocating. But as the days passed, she realized something. There was no going back. She had to grow, or she would be crushed under the pressure. At the same time, Helen's experience of motherhood was beginning to shift. She had already experienced the early challenges, but as time went on, she found a rhythm. Edward's growing support made a difference. The washing machine, the small business, and most importantly, Edward's presence in their family gave her the strength she needed. She was still busy, but the pressure was lighter now that their financial situation had improved. She was no longer overwhelmed. There were still late nights, but they were filled with love and partnership rather than stress and exhaustion. One evening, Helen sat with her 2 children watching them play. She saw how much they had grown and how her life had changed. As much as it had been hard, it had been worth it. The tears, the struggles, the worries, they were all part of the story of becoming who she was meant to be. She wasn't just surviving motherhood anymore. She was thriving in it. Helen's newfound peace was a stark contrast to Esther's experience. The exhaustion Esther felt as a new mother was overwhelming, and she still had to grapple with the issues in her marriage. Hilary's continued emotional distance only added to her feelings of loneliness. The moments when Hilary returned home, defeated by his own frustrations, were hard to endure. Esther was left feeling like a single mother in her own home. One night, Hilary came home unusually late. As he entered the living room, he saw Esther sitting in the dark, the baby asleep in her arms.
He approached her quietly, not knowing what to say. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know things haven't been easy." Esther didn't look at him. "We can't keep living like this," she said, her voice shaking. "I can't keep pretending everything will be fine. I need more from you." Hilary stood still for a moment, his face shadowed with guilt. Then he sighed deeply. "I know. I just don't know how to fix it." Esther's eyes welled up with tears. The truth was, she wasn't sure how to fix it either. But the love she had once felt for Hilary was slipping away, and there was no way of getting it back. The baby's cries echoed in the quiet room, and Esther knew that something had to change. But what? Then, as if the universe was offering her a sign, she received a call from an unexpected source. "Helen, I need to talk to you. There's something I've realized." Esther paused. Was this the moment of clarity she had been waiting for? Or was it the beginning of a new chapter, one that would change her life forever? Time brought clarity to both women. Helen's home became a place of peace and progress. Edward's growth provided more stability, and Helen found balance between motherhood and her business. They laughed more and worried less. One afternoon, Esther visited and noticed the calmness in Helen's home. The children were happy and Helen seemed relaxed. "You look peaceful," Esther said quietly. Helen smiled and replied, "It took time." Esther looked around and felt a mixture of regret and realization. Her own journey had been more difficult than she expected. "I thought waiting for comfort would save me from struggle," Esther admitted. Helen responded gently. "Every marriage has its own challenges." Esther sighed and said, "I wasn't ready for marriage or motherhood." Helen held her hand and said, "Growth can still happen." Esther nodded slowly. She now understood that marriage was not about the starting point, but about commitment and development. Motherhood was not a role one prepares for fully. It is something one grows into. The lesson had come late, but it had come. Marriage is not about who starts with more. It is about who grows. And motherhood is not about readiness. It is about strength discovered along the way. The moral lesson in this story is that marriage is not built on comfort, but on commitment. Starting small with the right partner can lead to lasting peace and growth, while chasing appearances can bring hidden struggles. Motherhood and marriage require patience, readiness of heart, and willingness to grow, not just the desire for an easy life. Before you go, remember this. Marriage is not a destination. It is a journey. And motherhood is not a title. It is a responsibility that grows with you. Choose wisely, grow patiently, love intentionally. If this story touched you, please subscribe to stay connected for more real-life lessons that prepare you for the life ahead. Thank you for watching. See you in my next story.